We're going to talk about all kinds of interesting stuff, including the cutting edge of social advertising. So let's jump up to our next panel and get that quickly done so that we can continue our agenda towards this fantastic media summit. So where's everybody? Chris, where are you? Noah, let's come on up here. Let's get it done. Okay, cutting edge social media. Big round of applause because it's always better with clapping. Always.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Zeev, and everyone here. This is a great event, really excited to be here, and I know we have two of our panelists. The third is texting me that he is running on his way here, literally through traffic, so hopefully Nikhil will be here in a few minutes. I'm Chris Fralic. I'm a partner with First Round Capital here in New York. We're an early stage, seed stage venture capital firm. Trying to be a startup in what we think is the staid-old 45 or 50-year-old world of venture capital, trying to help our companies scale better and faster as a result of being part of what we do. We've got over 150 portfolio companies across the country, and 50 of them right here in New York, and at least one of them here, Percolate, and hopefully Adaptly shortly. But to kick things off, I'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and to get the conversation going. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your companies, and give me your definition of social advertising to start things off. Noah.
Sure. So I'm Noah. My company is called Percolate. Percolate is a tool that works with Fortune 500 brands. It's a technology platform that helps brands create content. We're trying to answer this sort of question we see as the most fundamental one in social, which is, what do I actually say? As for the question around social advertising, it's a sort of interesting one. I was thinking 3 years ago, if we had answered that question, it would have been that, you know, there's sort of social things in banners, right? And we were really excited about sort of Twitter and banners and sort of sharing mechanisms in banners. And now where I feel like we've seen the shift is social advertising now means sort of advertising that's native to these social platforms. So we've seen 5 or 6 platforms really emerge over the last 3 years, I think. We've learned that it's not a zero-sum game, right? Like, I think we all believe Twitter and Facebook are both going to win, and Instagram's going to win, and Pinterest is going to win. They've all won. But what social advertising means to me at this point is each of these platforms is building their own sort of native advertising methods, right? And it's about, really seems to be about helping brands acquire audiences, and on the other side, helping them promote and distribute that content. So that's kind of how I view the social advertising world.
Aliza.
Okay, I'm not Noah. My name's Aliza Licht. I'm the SVP of Global Communications at Donna, Karan. And I started our social media platforms in 2009 under the guise of DKNY PR Girl, which was an anonymous character that I assumed the role of. And eventually, 2 years later, I came out of the closet, which probably wasn't the best choice of words to tell the press. But ultimately, it was great in the sense that the community that I built actually got to know me even better in human form rather than sketch form, cartoon form. Social advertising, because I handle PR traditionally, if you will, which means fashion shows, celebrity dressing, magazine editorial, and then I took on social media as sort of on the side, as a side gig, and I love you guys who have social media jobs as your main job. I'm extremely jealous of it. It's a space that I quickly realized I became addicted to, and really one that I didn't feel obligated to be in, but wanted to be in. So in essence, if you follow at DKNY, you will see that I tweet anywhere from between 25 to 60 times a day, and I promise you it's not noise. The people that follow really do enjoy the banter and, most importantly, the engagement. So when we talk about social advertising, and we all are consumers of social in one way or another, I think we know what rubs us the wrong way, and I think we know what we react to. And I think sort of what you said, Noah, is that each platform sort of has its neighborhood. And you know, in your neighborhood, you may be able to post signs or post ads or put up certain flowers, but in other neighborhoods, they want it really minimal and clean, and they don't want to be bothered. And I think it's very similar to that sort of mentality. So for us, we really like to do it in a very clever, tricky-ish way so that you are being marketed to, but you don't really know that you're being marketed to. So A quick example, when we were relaunching our London store, we renovated it, which to me is like, great, you renovated it. Companies do that all the time. It's not breaking news. No one cares. My CEO wanted us to get press about it. And the idea of telling the media that we renovated our store, I was like, they're going to be like, great, why are you telling me? That's fabulous. We can see it when we walk by. So I decided to do a play on social media, because this is how we consume news. We go to Twitter, basically. We go to Facebook. We see from our friends what people are talking about. We all know we get news via social media faster than we get emails from CNN Breaking News or any other news network you might follow. And I cast a video and put people into a fake social conversation that ultimately became a real social conversation and announced that we opened the store. So it's advertising. We did promoted tweets with it. We did very sort of integrated marketing campaigns with it. And while you watched the video, you had no idea it was DKNY. And you had no idea that you were going to learn that a store opened. But at the end of it, you found out. So I think you have to be clever.
Very cool. So broad question. Where does social fit inside of Brand's Best? Is it a tool for branding? Is it a tool for direct response? Some combination of both? What do you see at DKNY?
I think first and foremost, and similar to what Lisa said before, I don't know where she went, brand evangelism. I think that getting strangers, not press people, strangers, customers, to be able to speak on behalf of your brand when they're not paid to do so. You know, nothing makes me happier than when someone asks a question about a product and I happen to be in a meeting and I don't schedule a post. It's very stream of consciousness. So I get out of a meeting and I check my timeline and I'm like, oh, someone wants to know about the DKNY Cozy. And there's 10 other Twitter followers who have now explained what the Cozy is to this other person. That's social media to me. And that first and foremost. I think that as platforms like Twitter advance and sort of integrate social commerce into their infrastructure, we're going to see more and more of that. But right now, for me, it's brand evangelism.
Noah.
Yeah, well, so the first thing that I think has been interesting, and even maybe over the last 6 months, is we're starting to see more and more that there's not going to be one answer to that question. That Pinterest is actually just going to be a lot different than Twitter, and Twitter is increasingly obvious that it's very different than what Facebook is. So I think, you know, more and more over the next year or two, we're going to see this answer split out and sort of go its different paths as each platform really defines its own model and its own sort of the way people engage with brands on it. With that said, you know, I think that the big thing that Facebook solved when 4 years ago it decided to sell fans was the acquisition of audience and the ability to sort of build that group of people that you can talk to on an ongoing basis without cost. And that's a very sort of brand building exercise. I think the next step and where they're trying to get to and where the sort of the interest graph comes in is how do you sort of transform that and start to reach people who don't yet know you exist, don't yet know they want your product. I think that seems like the big distinction between social and search specifically, but sort of intent-based advertising is, you know, intent is amazing, but the sort of bigger business of marketing is in the creation of intent, not the harvesting of it. And I think Facebook is and Twitter and all of these platforms where they have such a good understanding of who you are and what you're interested in, there's an opportunity to sort of theoretically reach you before you know you want that thing.
Great. That's a good entry point to introduce, to let Nikhil introduce himself and Adaptly, and maybe just talk about how your customers are seeing advertising across all the different platforms.
Yeah, so apologies for being a little bit late. My name is Nikhil Sethi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Adaptly. We're a media buying technology for social that helps brands and agencies effectively execute media campaigns across all these different social environments. And for me, you know, really, I think it boils down to one sentence. You know, the question is starting to shift from what can I do as a brand in social to what can consumers actually do. You know, there's a sort of a general notion that's starting to emerge, and just we as consumers use Facebook and Twitter in parallel for very different reasons, right? I have an account on Facebook, I have an account on Twitter, I have an account on SomeOne and Pinterest, and every other social platform is out there, and I consume media, and we all consume media from these different entities in very different ways, right? So it's almost foolish to start to call social, the sum of all these individual parts, just because they're all so very different, as Noah said as well. So from that point of view, if we start to ask the question, what can consumers do in these platforms? If a consumer can tweet, if a consumer can stumble, if they can share something, watch a video, buy something, whatever those actions end up being, there's an almost one-to-one reflection between those consumer actions and what brands can actually do in these environments, right? Most recently, this will be probably the best, most recent example, Facebook acquired a company about 6 months ago called Karma, right? And Karma was intended to, help consumers give physical products to their friends. Very different from, back in the day when if it was your friend's birthday, you'd give them, a tiny GIF picture of a birthday cake and hope that they were satisfied with that. Now you can actually give them a real cake, right? So we started to see now new types of things emerge where you can almost posit that there'll be brand opportunities for you as a brand to give physical gifts to your consumers, right? And these types of one-to-one reflections are starting to emerge. So really, the question shifts from what can we do as brands to what can consumers actually do, and then almost looking at the next generation of ad units emerge that same way.
We kind of hope that they buy the gifts, but that's okay, as a brand.
So, I want to pick up on a question at with the last panel, and it was about metrics and ROI. And is that a fair question? Just interesting, Gokul from Facebook was in town a few weeks ago, and he really was digging in on the ROI, hard returns for Facebook advertisers. Is that what's important? Is that part of what you're tracking at DKNY?
I mean, of course we're looking at it, but I think the people that ask that question are never in the space. I really do believe that, because I think that if you're in the space and you understand the medium and you're engaging with people, and I'm not someone who creates content for somebody else. I create content for ourselves, so I feel it, I know it, I know the engagement. I think that, if I can sell 2 bags off of a Tumblr post, which I have, okay, fine, that's not like my CEO is going to do backflips over that, but it's still 2 bags off a Tumblr post with a coded backlink that I saw that they shopped from. So there are those transactions happening. It's not like you can hand in this giant report. I mean, yes, I can say that over the course of Fashion Week in 4 days, we got on Twitter 2.1 million global impressions. My CEO will say to me, okay, so what? What does that mean? What does that do? What'd you sell? What is, what? But, I mean, to me, it's like that's not the function of it right now until we're not there yet. I think we're heading toward that, and people are trying to figure it out, but we're not quite there yet. But I don't think we should give up on it, because it will come.
Nick, what are your clients seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it comes back to what, Noah said before, too, about the difference between demand generation versus demand harvesting, right? Can you have both in the same platform? Ideally, that is kind of the holy grail that we look for, right? But I think, even at a higher level, philosophically, if you think about kind of what social is trying to do, it's trying to figure out how to quantify meaningfulness, right? The whole idea of a lot of these social platforms being around some feed-based mechanism, right? Most of these social platforms are feed-based, even Pinterest and everything else. So, the idea from a product perspective becomes, how can we only show things that are relevant to the people when they come to our site? So if this, Tumblr post about this bag is extremely relevant to this audience, then it'll get displayed in these sort of newsfeed environments and then lead to purchases and things like that. So how do we almost think about these social platforms from a metric perspective? If we can understand value and meaningfulness and deliver those types of messages and content to these environments, there will be bottom funnel conversions. There will be ROI. That's just a net result of having a valuable product or service.
Yeah, I think the user experience though is going to mean a lot. I mean, I know that if a link takes more than 2 seconds to open, I'm out. So I mean.
I have a bunch of different takes on this, but it's a tough question. I think, it's a pretty natural one. I also think we don't sort of talk enough about how, ROI has always been a really tough question in brand marketing, right? Like, this has never been easy. It's the media mix modeling at big brands to figure out the real impact of spend across channels is an incredibly complex thing, and so it's going to be hard. I think there's a couple different pieces that we've been thinking about and working and talking to brands about. I think one is really, again, understanding each platform, understanding what you're trying to achieve, and measuring it independently. So, I was having a conversation with a brand just recently about the goal of Twitter. And, the goal of Twitter was much more it was to reach a very different audience than they were trying to reach on Facebook. And being able to measure those effectively is going to be different. I think the other thing is research is really going to have to come along here because, a lot of what brands are trying to do, as we've been talking about, is continue to build the brand, continue to build engagement. There are a lot of brands who are not selling things online, so we're not going to be able to track back to that purchase. And so what does it mean? What is the real impact beyond the like? Because I think there is a danger that we're going down this path where we're just looking at the like, and we're driving a type of content that sometimes is not going to be the most useful for building the brand long term. So I think we've got to get better at understanding the real impact of this stuff soon before it's too late.
But I would argue two things, not against you, but one, I would ask the question, I mean, seriously, what is the ROI on a billboard in Times Square? I mean, Lisa mentioned it before. Social media, I feel like, is being held to a higher standard because it's new and it's unknown, it's the Wild West. But really, we have billboards in Times Square. I can't give you enough. I mean, I don't know how many tourists went by there today. I have no idea. No one seems to care about that investment. That's number one. And number two, I feel, and being in the space, there's clicking on a link and you're like, okay, that person bought from that link. But then there's also the awareness that maybe pops in a few weeks later when they're walking through Bloomingdale's and they're like, oh, DKNY. I read something about that. And you can't quantify that, but it counts. So I don't know.
And I think actually a lot of that comes with the stigma of just digital advertising, right? When anything gets thrown in the internet, it's immediately, super trackable, super measurable, et cetera, et cetera.
They're all spoiled.
So I mean, I think part of it has to just be split down the middle in the sense that we have to assume that, there's one side of social and specific that can be tracked, can be measured, can be held to this high standard, does need surveys, does need research, does need, ROI sort of metric associated with it. Then there's the other side of it, which is more on traditional than it is digital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's been a challenge. It's because it's so easily measured, it is held to a higher standard. We've got a lot of brands in the audience here, so I'd like to open this up to the panel. What are you seeing in terms of trends or best practices of how social is handled inside of a brand? What are the roles? Are budgets moving? Or where is it reporting? Any comments or best practices or things you're seeing, Noah?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think more and more we're seeing it sort of finally shake out into the marketing department and sort of laddering up to the CMO. I think broadly, I sort of feel like social is a little bit like where websites were in like 2000, where for a while brands weren't quite sure the internet was going to stick around, and so they just sort of outsourced everything, and it was cool, and then they were like, okay, this is going to be a real thing for a long time, and so they started to bring more and more of it in house, and I kind of feel like that's how brands are feeling now about social, is like, okay, we're pretty sure Facebook and Twitter and these platforms are going to be here for a while, and it's time to bring some more of the sort of core management of it in-house. And so, I mean, we're still seeing a lot of work done all over the place, and we're still obviously seeing a lot of content created by agencies, but we're also seeing brands more and more sort of take more of a leadership role in defining their own social strategy and then working with organizations to build that out.
It's a little different for us because we decided that public relations would spearhead social from the Twitter side, and we gave marketing Facebook. It was just one of those, you touch it, you own it. And from a legal standpoint, we felt very strongly that it was one person who is an executive of the company, me, so that it would be very carefully monitored as far as communication. I mean, when you think about the role of public relations for celebrities, for sports athletes, for all these people, pre-Twitter, pre-social media, they had a role, which was to control the message. And with social media, the message is all of a sudden not controlled anymore. Celebrities have accounts, they can say whatever they want, their publicists sit in their office watching these things happen. So from my seat, because I'm not an intern or I'm not an assistant in my company, I don't have to approve posts. I do it from my head when I want to, when I don't want to. There's no rhyme or reason. It's a very sort of weird situation. But I think public relations and marketing is definitely where it should be. And when you bring it in-house, you get the DNA of the company and the brand message, I think, much more into that message than you do when you go outside and you're trying to teach someone that brand DNA.
You know, I think and we've probably seen this trend happen a lot, you know, the socialize the enterprise trend, right? You know, where it's not just marketing and PR, it's finance, it's IT, it's every group has something to do with social, right? And from that perspective, you know, if what I see from the brands we work with is the biggest challenge is education on the organization side. And what really education boils down to is language and vernacular, right? The word social has no meaning anymore, unfortunately. Right? You know, social can mean something to Facebook, it means something to you as a brand, it means something to me as a technology company, it means something to Google, it means something to an ad network, it means something to the agency, it means totally different things to every part. So how do we come together and kind of create a set of vernacular or a set of language that makes sense to each counterpart, I think is going to be one of the biggest things to help increase or decrease a lot of the friction to do more things social.
I think we're running out of time. Let me just give a quick one. GM kind of publicly, famously pulled all their Facebook ads about 5 months ago. Is that a canary in the coal mine, or is that a head fake? Speed bump. What is it?
It was, I think, some craziness. I mean, you can't. There are too many. There's a billion people on Facebook. They're not gone forever. Even when they made that announcement, most importantly, they said, we're just pulling additional advertising spend. We're still going to spend $40 or $50 million creating content for our Facebook pages. So they're not going anywhere. Somebody somewhere had a bad day.
Totally agree.
The thing for me is if we don't understand what success means, why should we spend? Let's take a step back, understand what is actually valuable here, and then we'll spend a ton more.
Outstanding. So
thank you all very much.
let's give it right up for these guys. This was fantastic.